The first time I heard the whisper, I thought it was the wind. It was a brittle autumn evening when I moved into the house, a lone structure sitting on a patch of land that had long been abandoned. The place had history, as most old houses do, but its past was buried under silence, locked away in the wary stares of the townsfolk who refused to speak about it. The house had been cheap, absurdly so, and though I was warned about its past, I didn't care. I needed solitude, an escape from the mess of my old life. The land stretched for acres, mostly unkempt, with trees that clawed at the sky and grass that grew wild and tangled. At the farthest edge of the property, just beyond a crooked wooden fence, sat the well. It was old, far older than the house itself. The stones were worn, dark with dampness, and the wooden cover that once sealed it had rotted away long ago. A gaping hole into the earth. I had always been warned about wells as a child. Never get too close, my grandmother would say, because once something goes in, it doesn't always come back out the same. I had laughed at those words then, but standing before this ancient pit in the ground, something about it unsettled me. That first night, I lay in bed, exhausted from unpacking, the house creaking and sighing around me. The wind outside rustled through the trees, whispering through the cracks in the window. And then I heard it, a voice, soft, faint, rising from the earth. "Help me." I sat up, heart pounding. The whisper was distant, almost part of the wind, but distinct. It was coming from outside, from the well. I told myself I was imagining things. The mind plays tricks in unfamiliar places. But sleep never came easily that night. The next morning, I stood at the edge of the well, peering into its darkness. The sun barely penetrated the abyss. I dropped a small rock inside and listened. 5 seconds passed, then 10. The sound of the rock hitting the bottom never came. I stepped back unnerved. That night, the whispers returned. "Please." It's so dark. This time it was clearer, closer. I forced myself to ignore it. I buried myself in work, in distractions, in anything that would keep my mind from drifting toward that awful sound. But the whispers never stopped. On the third night, I finally gave in. I took a flashlight, stepping carefully through the wet grass, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The night was silent except for the occasional hoot of an owl, the rustling of unseen creatures in the brush. But as I neared the well, all sound died. The air became unnaturally still. I swallowed hard and leaned over the edge, shining my light into the darkness. Nothing. And then movement, a shift in the blackness. A shape. My breath hitched. I yanked the flashlight away, my hands trembling. It was nothing, just shadows, just my imagination. And then, just as I turned to leave, the whisper came again, but this time, right behind me. "Help me." I spun around, the light shaking in my grip. The well was empty, gaping like a mouth waiting to swallow something whole. But I could feel it now, the presence, watching. I ran back to the house, locking the door behind me, my heart a drum in my chest. But locks don't keep out whispers. That night, the voice moved. It was no longer just outside. It was inside. It came from the walls, from the floorboards, from the very air in the room. Whispers slithered through the darkness, curling around my ears, filling my mind with words I didn't understand. And then I heard a scraping sound, a slow, deliberate dragging, something moving. I held my breath. Then a thump. Something heavy fell just outside my bedroom door. I couldn't move. The whisper came again, right outside the door now. I see you. My body acted before my mind could process. I grabbed the nearest thing, a lamp, and threw it at the door. The crash echoed through the house, but when silence settled, nothing moved. No whisper, no dragging. And then, the worst part, the doorknob turned. I ran, out the window, into the cold night, through the wet grass. I ran until my lungs burned, until I reached the well, and then I saw her, a figure standing just beside it, a woman, or what was left of one. Her hair hung in thick, matted strands, her skin pale and waterlogged, her eyes sunk in black voids. She stared at me, her lips barely moving as she whispered, "You let me out." A hand shot forward, fingers like talons, and before I could move, darkness. When I awoke, I was lying in the dirt, the sun creeping over the horizon. My body ached, my head throbbed. The house stood quiet behind me. The well was sealed, a new cover, a heavy stone slab carved with symbols. My hands were covered in dirt, and the whispers were gone. But as I walked back toward the house, dazed and exhausted, something caught my eye. A message, faintly scratched into the stone covering the well. 3 words. She still waits.